I'd mentioned before that there are actually only two stitches in knitting. One is the knit stitch and the other one is the purl stitch. And sometimes when the stitches are put together in a group, the whole group is referred to as a pattern or a stitch. This cloth is the stocking stitch, which is a combination of both the knit stitch and the purl stitch. And this is very often the pattern that is used for making garments, for example, a sweater or other garments that have a right and a wrong side. You can see that this side is quite smooth and the wrong side is very, very bumpy, which is basically the purl stitches that are showing up. With the stocking stitch, we have a bit of a problem in that if it doesn't have a border, it's going to curl up by itself. That's okay if you're making a sweater. The side seams will not have a border like this, but on the center seam of a sweater you will always find that there is this type of a border that's put onto that. This is basically the garter stitch border that is put on the edge to keep the stocking stitch flat and to keep it from curling up. We are going to start with the stocking stitch, the garter stitch at the bottom, which is 3 rows of plain knitting, and then the first row is going to be knitting straight across, and it's the second row that we are going to be doing the purl stitch, because we are knitting from here that way, and then we have to get back the other direction, and that direction is going to be the purl stitch. There are basically 2 methods of casting on your stitches. For the garter stitch dishcloth, we did the knitted cast on. For this one, we are going to do the long tail cast on. So I have a tail of thread that is about 1 yard long, or 1 meter long, and that is hanging from under my index finger, and this yarn is coming from the ball. So I've got the yarn going over my thumb, around my index finger, and I'm holding both yarns with my little finger. We're going to dive in from the top, scoop up the thumb and down the index finger to catch that loop, and we now have 2 stitches on the right needle. And we're going to continue on that basis, up the thumb, down the index finger, pick up that loop, and it's on the needle. And I'm using my thumb to pull that yarn so that I have a nice tidy stitch on my right needle. And again, we don't want to create them on the point or the tip of the needle because your stitches will be too small. We want them to rest on the barrel of the needle. Okay, so again, the tail yarn is under my index finger, my thumb is picking up, stretching out with the yarn from the ball, and I'm going up the thumb, down the finger, and catch that loop. Up the thumb, down the finger, catch the loop. Up, down, and catch that loop. And we're going to do that for 40 stitches. And even when we were doing the knitted cast on, we are casting the stitches onto the left needle, but here we are casting them onto the right needle. Again, I'm going up the thumb, down the finger, catch that loop. And do that to get you until you've got 40 stitches on your needle. Okay, you have all of your stitches done on the right needle, and we still have a tail that we will need to work in afterward. So now I'm going to transfer the needle to my left hand, because remember, we are working from the left needle onto the right needle. So now I'm just going to continue with my knitting. Remember, the knit stitch is insert your right needle into that stitch and wrap the yarn around that needle and pick up that loop and slide it off the needle. And you'll see that this whole system looks a bit different than the stitches that you had from the knitted cast on. because this is basically just having made a loop on the needle, so you don't really have stitches, so we want to be careful not to lose anything. And we're going to do 3 rows of knitting, which is 3 rows of garter stitch. Okay, my 3 rows of garter stitch are done, and your pattern says to knit 3 stitches, and place a marker. A marker is simply a ring of some sort that goes onto your needle to help you to count where you might have left off, or where you have to change or do something with the pattern. And then the pattern says to knit to the last 3 stitches and place a marker. And those 3 stitches at the side are beginning to create that little border, that protective border that is going to keep the stocking stitch from curling onto itself. I have a couple more to go. And I just have 2 more to do. And according to your pattern, right now we are working on the right side of the pattern. I placed my marker and I have 3 more stitches. Okay, according to the pattern for row 2, again we are going to knit the first 3 stitches, and because we did the knit on the previous row, this is still doing the garter stitch, because with the garter stitch, you recall, every row is knitted. I'm going to transfer the marker to my right needle. we're going to do the purl stitch. I'm bringing the yarn to the front. With the knit stitch, you remember we went up through the front. With the purl stitch, we're going to go down and wrap the yarn around. And I'm actually pulling a bit of tension on there, so that the yarn just doesn't fall out. And I am going to make so I'm going to scoop that strand to make the stitch and pull it off the needle. Again, we're going down the front, and you can see that the right needle is in front of the left needle and its face pointing down. Wrap the yarn around and scoop it and pull that stitch off the left needle. Down, wrap, and I'm holding it tight. I'm pulling it off. And again, as with the knit stitches, you want to make sure that you have transferred your stitch onto the barrel of the needle to establish the tension instead of having it tight. You can see how tight that is on the point. So if you were to be knitting on the point all the time, you would have a lot of difficulty with the rest of your stitches. So I'm going to slide that onto the barrel, and it gives me the right tension for that stitch. Again, we're diving in, wrap around, scoop it, and pull it off. And we're going to do the purl stitches all the way to the marker. Dive, wrap, and scoop it, and pull it off. Dive, wrap, scoop it, and pull it off. Dive, wrap, scoop, and slide. Dive, wrap, scoop, and slide. And all my work is getting quite bunched up, so I'm just going to slide it down the needle just so that it's laying nice and straight. And we have 2 more purls to do. Dive, wrap, scoop, and slide. Dive, wrap, scoop, and slide. As we did with the first marker, I'm simply going to transfer it to the right needle, and the last 3 stitches have to be knitted. So now I'm going to take my yarn and have it in the back, and we're going back to doing a knit, which is up through the front stitch, through the front strand of the stitch, wrap, scoop, and slide that off. Up, wrap, scoop, and slide it off. Point it up, wrap, scoop, and slide. And that is row 2 of your pattern. And your instructions say to repeat those 2 rows. Row 1, you'll recall, is knitting straight across the entire work. Row 2 is coming back this way, and row 2 is going that way, and you will knit 3, transfer your marker, purl across to the marker, and then knit 3. When I'm knitting, and I prefer to finish my row before putting my knitting down, so I've put my knitting down the next day, I've come back to it and trying to figure out what row I'm working on. Then first of all, the work is on the left hand needle, so you know that this is the work that's facing you, that's what you're working on. And you can see that these are knit stitches. The way I remember between the knit side and the purl side is when you think about a K, it's a flat letter, but a purl is a bumpy letter. So the K is a flat stitch, and the purl, the bumpy letter, has bumps on the back. So that's how, if you get confused which is the knit and which is the purl, if it's bumpy, it's purl because the purl has that bump in it. And if it's flat like this, and also these kind of look like little K's when you think about it. So I've got my work is on my left needle, and the knitting is showing to me, so therefore I know that I'm going to be knitting. Here, unfortunately, I put my knitting down when I was halfway through a row, so now I have to figure out, okay, where was I going? And this is the right side, which is the knit side. However, which way am I going to go? And so let's take a look at the other side, and that's the purl side. The way you're going to figure it out is, remember that you are working from the left needle onto the right needle. So from this side, let's see what's happening here. We have stitches both on the left and the right needles, but look where the yarn is coming from. It's on what right now is the left needle because that's where I'm holding it. However, if we turn it this way, remember that you're knitting from the left onto the right, so where is the yarn sitting? Now the yarn is sitting on the right needle, so that means I know that I am actually working on the second row, which is only the purl row, compared to if I look at this one. If I start knitting again, the yarn is not with my right needle, it's with the left. So if I were to start knitting again, I'm knitting again half of the row that's already been done. And you can actually see here that this row is shorter than this one, which also gives you a clue that this part of the row has not yet been done. So I'm going to turn this around, and now I can see, especially because I'm on a purl row, the yarn is in the front position to make my next purl stitch. So now I'm going to continue working with my yarn in my right hand, working from the left needle onto the right. Okay, your pattern tells you to continue working rows 1 and 2 until you're ½ an inch short of your desired length. And then you're going to do 3 rows of knitting, which 3 rows of the garter stitch. So I'm going to start with the garter stitch. And because I'm going to be knitting straight across with all the garter stitch, I no longer need the markers, so I'm just going to take that off and knit across the row. And when I get to the next marker, I'm going to remove that one as well, and then I can just do 2 more knit rows, and then we'll be ready to bind off. With the garter stitch dishcloth, we did bind off knitwise, so this time let's do it purlwise. So just like when you're doing your normal purl stitch, we're going to purl 2 stitches together. So it's exactly the same like doing a purl stitch, except we're catching 2, and now because we're binding off, we're going to take that stitch and put it back onto the left needle. Again, we're making a purl stitch under 2 stitches together, catch that loop, slide it off, but now we're going to put it back on again. And as I mentioned before, you want to make sure that you don't have that really tight, because if you keep those stitches tight, then you will have a curved edge. So I'm just going to give that a little bit of a tug to keep everything laying smooth. And we're going to carry on until all the stitches are bound off purl-wise. And we say purl-wise because we are actually doing the purl to get those stitches off the needles. Okay, there's a couple of things that I want to show you. This is a good. I'm not going to put a loop onto this one because I think this is a good size for a little mug rug. But remember that we did the knit-wise binding off on the garter stitch, and look at the difference in the top edge compared to this one. So your pattern direction will tell you to do either the purl-wise bind off or the knit-wise bind off, depending on how the designer wanted the finished product to look. There's also a difference between the knitted cast on that we did for the garter stitch. You can see how stretchy it is. That is usually used for a garment or someplace where you need stretch, like the cuff of a sock or the cuff of your sleeve or the cuff of the bottom of the sweater. Compared to this, there's very little give. So this kind of a smooth, this long tail cast on gives you a smooth edge, and this is very often used for something like a shawl or a scarf that you don't want, that doesn't need that kind of a give. If you're not comfortable using that smaller needle to working in your ends, go ahead and use this darning needle, which has a very blunt end. But I'll show you how you can avoid some of the pitfalls of it coming undone. The easiest way to get them thread is just to make a bend, and then you can squeeze it through the needle, through the eye of the needle. So instead of going through the strands, even with this one, it's fairly easy to get through some of the strands. But if you don't want to worry about that too much, you can just go under the loops. But instead of just doing one row, I will do it at an angle and go through 3. My tail was a bit too long. Okay, so I'm going to pull that not terribly tight, because you can see how tight that is. It's pulling in and changing the shape of that. So I'm just going to pull that back up. But to avoid this coming undone, I just came through that one stitch, so I'm going to go back through that stitch again, almost creating a knot. So I can just weave under a few more stitches. Again, my tail's too long. Move the needle down. So that's almost creating a bit of a knot. Again, this is the last stitch that I came through, so I'm going to go back through that one and go through a few more stitches. And at the end, I'm just going to work through a couple of the strands. And depending on your needle, this one seems to be working quite easily to gut through the strands compared to the point. But you can see that I haven't really changed the pattern, and it's sort of locked in, so that should be quite stable without having to worry about the ends working their way out.